last week I've done a service called The Hanging of the Greens, where we transform the space before you. And today is going to be a little bit of a modified version of that as we live back into what this looks like to us as a congregation, post-COVID, not quite post-COVID, whatever it is, but we're being mindful of what we do together as a congregation and to do things differently. Isn't that the name of the game right now? How do we evolve and do things differently? So this is going to be a sermon chat. Kristen coined that word. I said, Kristen, I need to do a sermon and a children's chat all together. And she's like, call it a sermon chat. Okay, let's call it a sermon chat. So I give you credit for that. Thank you, Kristen. All right. So, as you know, everything has meaning in the church. There's always a level of symbolism. So when we do things on these type of Sundays, why do we have 4 candles? And why do we have a wreath? And what's this all this other stuff? So we're going to take some time to break it all down in the overarching scheme of on this Peace Sunday, where we hear these words of annunciation. We hear these words of do not fear. So, why do we do certain things? Why do we decorate? Is it solely for tradition? Is it ritual? It's a little bit of both. So what season are we in? Advent. And how many Sundays are there in Advent? 4. Can we name them all?
Yes.
I've heard them all. That's good. So usually you get 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th. Nice. That's great, Tom. Spoken like an accountant. So hope, peace, joy, and love. And usually the candles are in a wreath. And why are they usually in a wreath? Any ideas? Daniel, what do you think?
To symbolize something?
Right. Can we narrow it down just a little bit? What does it symbolize? A circle. Why is it a circle?
Because it's a circle.
What?
Everything comes back around to you.
Oh, there's that. And also everlasting life. Circle of life. From birth to death.
Wait, are you talking about circle of life?
Yep. Yes, sure. Yeah. And why do you think it's green? Because
It's green because it's a circle, and it's a circle.
and it symbolizes
It's symbolizing life.
exactly.
And it's also symbolizing circle.
Yep, everlasting life, right, exactly. So candles, hope, peace, joy, love, everlasting life. Here, present, on this day. And on this Peace Sunday, as we read this chronological reading of this Christmas story, we hear from the angel, what was the angel's name? Gabriel. And talks to Mary. And it's the Annunciation. And the Annunciation is that announcement that she's going to have a baby. And it's pretty big news. And the angel tells Mary not to be afraid, and yet I remember when I found out I was going to have Daniel, I was pretty excited and pretty afraid, all rolled up into one. And so the angel tells her not to be afraid, and yet it's really hard to not to be afraid at times. So we set these symbols before us, especially look at these banners. We see these, who's on these banners? Mary and Jesus, right? And blue is a symbol of Mary, or a color of Mary. And so on this day we are reminded of Mary and the fear that she may have felt. And we also reminded of how God met her in her fear. God was there with her in the midst of it. And Mary had a few things to say to Gabriel before it was all puppies and roses and let's do this. She had questions for him, didn't she? She's like, how is this all going to come about, Gabriel? So there's a level of resiliency in her part and a little bit of control, even though it felt like it was so out of control. But God met her there in that time. So on this day, when we see all this blue, where's some other blue up here? Right on the tables. And what are on the pyramids?
In the massive flag.
The star. And what does the star symbolize? Yeah, you, Ruby.
The star symbolizes the star.
Right, but where was the star?
In the sky.
In the sky. And who did it lead?
God.
The wise men and the shepherds. And there was a level of fear in that time as well. And God met the shepherds. And God met the wise men. And God met the wicked. So as we continue to talk about the symbolism, we've got these here before us. What's all this stuff? What are these called? Berries, and then what's the greens called? Holly and ivy. And so why do you think we have this as a part of the story? Ruby.
It's a symbolize life.
Yeah, a portion, yeah. But there's another piece to the story that Christmas often holds, that in life
Happiness.
there is death. So, and the red berries remind us of Jesus' blood. The ivy reminds us of the crown of thorns that was placed on Jesus' head. That in this season, as much as there is eternal life, there is death, and then there's resurrection. It's the continuance of the story and how we hold all of this dissonance and dichotomies together, even in this time, which is much like the world is. There's so much chaos and fear, and yet we keep holding on to hope and peace, joy and love. So this is where I need a little help from whoever wants to join in the fun, is I would like these berries, I've got a bunch of them here, placed in the wreath and on the windowsills where the candles are, and we're going to take some time to do that right now. So whoever wants to come on down, come on down. Since when have you been bashful, Ruby? Come on down. And anybody can come, even adults can come forward if you need to stretch a little bit. Come on down. Okay, here you go. Where do you want it? So, can you put some of these? We have communion. And why would we, so as a part of our tradition here at Hazel Park, we have communion the first Sunday of every month. It's just part of our routine and ritual and tradition. But what's so significant about communion? Tell me about communion, folks. Why does it matter?
It has to do with the Last Supper.
Last Supper, that's right. Yep. Jesus breaking bread. With whom was he breaking bread with? The disciples. And he calls upon the presence of the holy to be in the midst, this Last Supper. And then Jesus then commissions his disciples to say, remember me, and to continue to go forth and to do. And so on this Sunday, we remember this in light of this season of birth and life. We also remember that Last Supper, we remember death, we remember resurrection, and we remember to keep going out into the world to share this message of hope, peace, joy, and love, even in the midst of fear, knowing that God continues to meet us in this fear. All right, so now we have these beautiful flowers. What are these flowers called? Poinsettias. And they are a lovely flower to take care of. What shape are they? What shape do they have? Like when you look at the blossom. A star, yes. And what about that star? Shown in the night sky. You see the repetitive nature of symbols, right? But the symbols kept telling the story, and that's how people remembered the story, oral tradition, so then it continued to get passed on. There's also another story that these poinsettias remind us of, is that when Jesus was born, King Herod was in power. And King Herod caught wind that there was a baby born that everybody kept calling a king, and Herod did not like the competition. So Herod decided to have all the infant boys killed. And that is why, exactly, yeah. And that is why Mary and Joseph and Jesus fled to Egypt to get away. And so we remember that part of the story. So I invite anybody that'd like to come forward, because we usually don't have the poinsettias all clumped together. That's no fun, right? So we're going to place the poinsettias in a beautiful display up in front. So as you'd like to come forward to do that, I need a little help with that this morning. They do good work. Nicely done. Thank you. And next week, it'll be a continuation of a few more other symbols that come into play for the season. Thank you for all the helpers who came on down. I wanted to share a few more words about the Annunciation, though, for today. As we think about this season of Advent, this Sunday of Peace, Dr. Christine J. Hong, one of the guest writers for our Advent series, talks about the dissonance of this announcement. The command to put away fear, and then what comes later in the story, birth, like it's all puppies and roses, and how do we hold on to that? Yet as she writes, quote, what if the dissonance is what we are meant to sit with? The same dissonance is part of many people's stories. Every day, people are faced with untold grief and pain And the gospel or the good news is not enough to take that pain and fear away. Hope sounds hollow to those who are enduring the wretched parts of life. We cannot move to theologize the fear and anguish of those around us who suffer. Rather than gloss over the dissonance, we should sit with Mary. And can we even sit with Mary? Yes, I think so. The Magnificat, the song of courage, is a mark of her bravery. And still we know, because we too are human, that courage rises despite our fear, not in its absence. Those who have suffered loss know this. So Dr. Hong continues to write, perhaps this story and the dissonance of the angel's command are an invitation to us to sit with those who are experiencing the dissonance of a world moving on despite their personal struggle. A world that says, cheer up and move on, while they are still grieving. Perhaps the dissonance invites us to accompany people moving through their pain, as Mary and Jesus accompanied one another through life events only the two of them understood. And despite the dissonance, they moved through the liminal and tender space of their lives together. And in other words, as Dr. Hong writes, God moved through the liminal and tender spaces of God's human life with Mary, even as they were both afraid. So we look at these banners, and we look at these flowers, and we look at this Advent wreath and the holly and the ivy. We look at the star. We look all around us. And we know that God meets us here, meets us in our fear, even when we're not ready to move on. We know life is not full of puppies and roses. And we certainly do not know about all the outcomes when we say yes to things before we know what's going to happen on the other side. And yet we share the story year after year, generation after generation, because it gives us hope and peace, joy, and love. Not all at the same time. It comes in our own time and in our own space and in our own way, our own rhythm. And it gives us courage to keep on keeping on. This is what this announcement holds for us today. May it be so.